The way I joke about it, but it is real, is I spent my first 7 years meditating, becoming more and more miserable. And it wasn't working the way it was supposed to work, Scott. And I was surrounded by world-class meditation teachers, and I was just pouring more and more love into the system, loving awareness, being with everything that was going on inside of me. And it felt like I was becoming more and more aware of how uniquely broken I was.
Derek Haswell is the co-founder of the award-winning meditation app Happier, where he's spent the past decade producing content with some of the world's best meditation teachers and scientists, including the Dalai Lama. He now spends his time as an executive coach, helping leaders drive more impact while becoming more aligned. In this conversation, we explore the difference between the waking up path and the healing path, and how these two paths of consciousness evolution can start to work together.
This is like completely mind-blowing to me. Everything that I'd learned or known, all of a sudden I'm awake in the middle of the night having a conversation with myself. And that opened up, that was about 5 years ago, it opened up this path of work that was very distinctly different from the waking up work that I was doing in meditation. This was much more about integration, finding the different parts of myself.
Derek describes how waking up and healing are different, but ultimately complementary in how they can create more well-being and fulfillment.
I'd like to think about it as kind of like an X and Y axis. It's the engineer in me, where the going upwards is kind of the waking up. The Y axis is waking up. Going along the side is kind of like the healing work, the integration work. So I think of waking up as seeing more clearly the nature of things as they are. What leads to happiness, what leads to suffering, what doesn't. Whereas healing and integration is more about welcoming our shadows, the different parts of us from different experiences that we've had in the past, welcoming more and more of our feelings, including the ones that feel hard.
Regardless of where you start, these paths seem to eventually converge if you just keep going. When this happens, things can really click and kickstart your growth to the next level.
And at some point down that path, one will start to wonder, what am I doing this for? Like, it's useful. Clearly, I'm becoming more present, more aware, more kind towards myself and other people. But like, where is this going? And it starts kicking up questions in the what is this experience? So a lot of times, both of these paths end up converging to where people end up doing both healing and awakening work. And it's okay for people to kind of ping pong between the two, or go up one and then over, then up one. But this seems to be the direction.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. Derek, what is up, my friend?
Hey, Scott, thanks for having me.
Man, I am stoked to be having this conversation with you, brother. And we talked a lot about kind of where we might go, but an interesting thing to kind of kick us off here. When did you realize that there was this awakening path and then there was this kind of perhaps healing path?
Yeah, through a lot of pain, as often these doorways are. The way I joke about it.
Sounds familiar.
That's right. That's right. The way I joke about it, but it is real, is I spent my first 7 years meditating, becoming more and more miserable. And it wasn't working the way it was supposed to work, Scott. I was surrounded by world-class meditation teachers, and I was just pouring more and more love into the system, loving awareness, being with everything that was going on inside of me. And it felt like I was becoming more and more aware of how uniquely broken I was. And there was a friend of mine who had gotten into parts work, specifically through internal family systems therapy, introduced me to the idea, and being who I am, I like to just try things out. So there was one late night that I remember, I'll never forget. One of our kids woke up in the middle of the night. I put him back to sleep. It was probably 2 a.m. And I was sitting quietly, meditating. I was awake. I was just, all right, I'm going to be here. And I remember this big pain coming up in my chest. And I was like, I'm going to do the thing that my friend suggested. I'm just going to talk to it the way that one does with parts work, which we'll get into more later. So sitting, it grew bigger. And then I said, hi. And what happened? I got a hi in response back. How are you? I'm scared. This is like completely mind blowing to me. Everything that I'd learned or known, all of a sudden I'm awake in the middle of the night having a conversation with myself. And that opened up, that was about 5 years ago, it opened up this path of work that was very distinctly different from the waking up work that I was doing in meditation. This was much more about integration, finding the different parts of myself. This work can also happen through somatic work. It can happen in a lot of different ways. But for me, finding the different parts of myself and bringing them into my awareness and into who I was as a person instead of kind of cordoning things off and trying to be the Derek that was waking up. And that was what really woke me up to the possibility of both a path of waking up, seeing the truth of things as they are, and this healing or integration path of kind of welcoming more and more of myself into that loving awareness that I was cultivating in the waking up. So that's a little mini story about when the dam burst for me and this stuff really took root.
That's beautiful. And I'd love to zoom in a little bit when you said this meditation thing, this isn't working. What was that experience like? And I also, for the listeners out there, like, I know that there's a lot of people that struggle with meditation, and even to know that the founder of, one of the top meditation companies struggled with meditation, I think is just a really endearing, important thing for a lot of people to hear more about.
Yeah. Another story, Scott, I remember so vividly. There was an extended family member who I was just having a tough time with in relationship, and they were visiting in town, um, and I was at the same time happened to be editing some guided meditations from Sharon Salzberg, one of the preeminent teachers on loving kindness meditation, at that part of my work. And I would literally walk from one room where I was in this like intense conflict situation into the other room practicing loving kindness, editing these loving kindness meditations, while doing it. And it stands out for me because of the contrast, how much of a fraud I felt like. Like here I am doing this work that I'm trying to share with people. And then I walk into the other room and this is not what is happening in my body or in my experience. And it took time. This is a path that I expect to be on for the rest of my life. There are times and seasons and chapters in the meditation work where things feel like they're clicking and they're making sense, and seasons where things don't feel like they're making sense, or it's frustrating, or it feels like things are going backwards. And one of our meditation teachers, Joseph Goldstein, likes to tell a story about a hike in Hawaii and how progress on the meditative path is kind of like you're on a hike where sometimes you can see the progress. You're going up the hill, you're getting the vistas. And other times you're kind of going downwards. Actually, you're descending back into the forest canopy. And it's sometimes hard to see how over time you're continuing to trend upwards, but it's really hard to know when it feels like progress is being made or not made. That's part of this whole meditative waking up path as well.
So you had this parts work kind of aha. And then what happens next? Like, how did this unfold for you from there?
Yeah, maybe I'll step back too and talk a little bit about the relationship between the waking up and the integrating or the healing work too, and then I'll land my story in that context. I thought they were the same thing for the longest time. I thought meditation was kind of like doing the work to help whatever aspects of my life that I was hoping it would help. And powerful stuff, really powerful experiences on retreat and with different teachers. And I wasn't aware that there was other flavored work for me to be doing. And when, as I mentioned, that middle of the night experience, when kind of the dam burst, I really voraciously kicked into gear on oh, what kinds of work are there? How might I do it? Because it felt like there was so much pressure that built up. I'd like to think about it as kind of like an X and Y axis. It's the engineer in me, where the going upwards is kind of the waking up work. The Y axis is waking up. Going along the side is kind of like the healing work, the integration work. And
And when we say waking up, can we just define that, like, you know, because just for people so they just know concretely like what those paths are trying to achieve.
yeah, thanks for asking, Scott. So I think of waking up as seeing more clearly the nature of things as they are. What leads to happiness, what leads to suffering, what doesn't in each of those cases. And that is a multi-layered experience. And it trends in the direction of popular these days is talking about non-dual experiences, emptiness, awareness, consciousness. It's kind of an exploration in that direction. What is this thing that's happening in our experience? What is real? What's not? And a lot of these meditative paths have one exploring that really directly in their experience. Whereas healing and integration is more about welcoming our shadows, the different parts of us from different experiences that we've had in the past, welcoming more and more of our feelings, including the ones that feel hard. And so it's this path of, I like the word integration, because it's this path of kind of like recollecting ourselves. And in that path, we become more complex, more facets of us we become aware of. Does that make sense in terms of the waking up and the integrating? Do you have any follow-up questions on that?
No, it does. And I think my next question, and I think you're going to talk a little bit about your story, is what is the interplay of these two things?
Yeah. What is really fascinating, has become more and more fascinating for me, is exactly that. It's how the two interplay. First, there's often, we conflate the two. We just think this is a self-improvement or self-development path, or meditation is doing all the things. So we disambiguate. Interesting first. Now, I think people's paths trend through healing and awakening differently, this integration work and this waking up work. Some people, this maps more to my experience, spend a lot of time doing the waking up work and not so much time doing the healing work. And my experience of that is that the pressure continues to build for you to be interested in doing the healing or the integration work. So again, for me, it was waking up more and more to the ways that I was uniquely broken. And the pressure was building, building, building. And all of a sudden the dam burst when I realized there was this whole other avenue for me to pursue. And there was already a lot of awareness online and an interest in going there. And I'll just give you the other, like, other people will go down the integration path. They will do lots of therapy work. They'll do lots of work on their inner children. They'll do lots of somatic work. And my impression of that terrain as well, from the work that I do as a coach, but also people that I've talked to, is the pressure builds there to do the waking up work, but differently. So you talk to longtime therapists, or even Dick Schwartz, the inventor of internal family systems. He invented it over 40 years ago. He'll tell you he still has parts that he's working with and through. This integration and healing path goes on forever. And at some point down that path, one will start to wonder, what am I doing this for? Like, it's useful. Clearly, I'm becoming more present, more aware, more kind towards myself and other people. But like, where is this going? And it starts kicking up questions in the, what is this experience? So a lot of times, both of these paths end up converging to where people do end up doing both healing and awakening work. And it's okay for people to kind of ping pong between the two, or go up one and then over, then up one. But this seems to be the direction that people who are doing this kind of work of inner growth, inner healing, waking up work, they all kind of trend in that direction.
That makes sense. That's a very useful distinction. And I would add, I had a similar experience to you, where there was an emphasis on the waking up and then getting into the healing work afterwards. And, you know, one of the things I appreciate about that was there was such a developed witness ability that made the healing work like navigating that feel really natural and really easy, even in the absence of a practitioner often,
Yeah. And
or facilitator.
the inverse can be true for some folks as well, which is sometimes it's hard to access the witness before you've done some of the work on some core parts that might be getting in the way, or aspects of yourself that need healing. So I have a lot of
Mm.
trust that people find their way towards paths that make the most sense or that work for them, or really that solve their, address their suffering more acutely. And then it opens back up into these other terrain. So yes, for you and for me, it was, there was awareness that really got online. And then when we started the healing work, it was useful to bring that awareness right into the mix. And I guess the other way can be true as well for people.
Absolutely. And so as you kind of dove into the healing path, how did you, what shifts did you experience in overall life as well as the awakening practices and experience?
Yeah, it's now hard for me to separate the two, but I'll tell a
Mm.
story about how um, it was probably 2 weeks after I had finished reading Dick Schwartz's book, No Bad Parts. So I started diving into parts work, started researching it on my own, picked up the book that had recently been published. And 2 weeks later, I caught my wife listening to it, the audiobook version of it. And I was like, huh, that's cool. You know, that she's picking this stuff up. I must have done a really good job selling it. And that was the story I told myself. And she got through it. She was interested by it. We had some conversations about it, but it wasn't until a year later I was talking to her. And I was like, oh, we're talking parts work and IFS. I mentioned that I caught her listening to the audiobook and how there was something interesting about it. She's like, there wasn't anything really interesting to me about it, but I had to understand what had changed my husband so much in so short of a time.
Wow.
And so this the combination of the two. So the waking up work built a loving awareness, a loving presence that was there when I was when I was available. But I still had a lot of different parts of me. For me, it shows up as often a peacekeeper or like a striver achiever, and kind of these aspects of me would be the things that were driving forward. I got to do this for the business, or I got to help make these people happier. I'm going to avoid this conflict. Those things were still running strong, even with all of the loving awareness in the system. I would just be tracking that stuff was happening, but it wasn't like I had something that I could do with it. And so when the parts work came online alongside all of that loving awareness and the waking up work is when those patterns just started to shift. And my experience of them is they started shifting on their own. It wasn't like I'm going to work on blank. I want to be less blank. It was I just was doing this work, encountering these parts of me, offering healing where it made sense. And again, I started solo and then started working with coaches and therapists, which became a big part of my path. And my whole inner system changed. The Derek of now compared to the Derek of 5 years ago is completely different. And as a parent, as a business partner, as a husband, um, in ways that, again, like it's difficult for me to unpack the specifics of all the individual ways. And I'm far from perfect. This is still a work in progress. But I'm profoundly grateful for those shifts that seem to have just happened and continue to happen as more and more things just continue to be swallowed up by loving awareness and the healing and integration that's possible.
Well, I'm a big fan of the outcome myself. Even though I didn't know the Derek 5 years ago, but it's definitely working, whatever you're doing. And I think a lot of friends that I have that are getting on this path, they start to learn about, okay, well, I can do the parts work and I can do the who am I meditation and all these kind of different things. And they're a bit lost around, what do I do? Where do I focus my time? And I think I'd love to hear how you would respond to that, acknowledging that while acknowledging, of course, everyone has a unique experience.
Yeah. The short answer is follow what lights you up.
Mm.
There is so often in our self-improvement, self-help circles, this orientation towards like everybody's meditating, so you have to. Everybody's doing parts work or therapy or fill in the blank with whatever modality, so you have to. And that type of striving really can actually deepen the trenches. You set out to meditate because you're supposed to, and then even if you succeed, but more likely you fail at some point, and then like, oh, that's you feel worse off for having tried that in the first place. And um, joy, stuff that's lighting you up, is the not so secret signal that something is working for you. So if you sit to meditate, you're like, man, this is awful. I would say, cool, take that as signal. You don't need to do this right away. Get curious about why it is awful, and try a couple different things from people that you trust. Oh, cool, Scott's really into this thing, Derek's really into that thing. Like, who are the people in your life who you admire and respect that you could talk to about this kind of stuff and have a live conversation? And of bringing this experimental mindset, try some things out, see what really grabs you. And my sense is, if you do that, you land on something that is undeniable. In the business world, we talk about product market fit. This is when we develop and ship a product that just grabs, it's grabbed by the market. The market pulls you and your company towards some solution that you're setting out to build. And the feeling of when you hit product market fit versus when you didn't is unmistakable. It's like, I so vividly remember this 12 years ago. We were trying to build the company, hadn't found it yet. And everything was an uphill slog. And we were like, do we have it yet? We're not so sure. And then when it happened, there were no questions. It was like, oh, the market is pulling this from us as a company. And the same is true. This is my experience of parts work, internal family systems. For me, it was when that got a hold of me, you couldn't stop me. Couldn't stop me from reading the stuff, doing more research, doing solo stuff, finding people to help me. And it was this joyful exploration. And if it didn't work, or if it stopped working at some point, great, no big deal. Like, I'm not too stressed about that type of frame. And so that's my gentle frame, is like, drop some of the striving, some of the have to, some of the should have, and like, what lights you up in this terrain? Why? And so that's the angle that I often explore with people when they're stepping in.
I love it, man. I love it. It seems like, just to offer a few reflections, this notion that joy and inspiration are a form of intelligence has definitely been overlooked, I would say, in our culture, in our hyper rationalist culture. And I truly believe that is, one of the deepest forms of intelligence. And I would also offer, it's been my experience, because like you, I've tried a bunch of shit and experimented with a bunch of stuff, and had a definite period of spiritual ambition where I was like trying to find the optimal thing to get somewhere quickly. And what I eventually realized, and I'm so grateful for, was my teacher really focused on developing the character of trust, and this deep sense of trust. And what eventually I ended up realizing was that whatever was needed, whatever practice or modality or the next book I was supposed to read, it would emerge into my experience as I needed it. And that, I think, is the same with this stuff, where if you can start to just trust that and start to just pay attention, that thing that next thing is it's just going to come to you.
Yeah, moving through the world with that kind of trust or faith online can be so delicious. It's like a really different orientation. And one of the things that I've seen is sometimes people have to bootstrap their way into that. It sometimes is hard or daunting to feel like, well, I got to just search for the joy. And so there can be, for as much as what I just said, there can be some striving that is useful at times to get you to do the experiments, to find the thing that grabs you. I'm curious, Scott, when you started on your path, what was it that grabbed you about the particular traditions that you fell into, or the teachers that you worked with, that looking back on it was this like, it was some flavor of joy or curiosity or interest or aspiration that just like sunk its hooks in and pulled you into it?
Great question. Well, I would share first that I don't think I actively choose this path. I was very much kind of forced down this path. My meditation journey started when I developed alopecia, and it was like, you need to meditate or you're going to have no eyebrows. So, and what I remember distinctly that kept me going was I did the take 10 headspace thing. This was 2013.
Yep.
And I was like, the whole time I was like, is this doing anything? Is this working? Like, I don't really notice a difference. Am I just wasting my time? I could be doing something productive. The typical optimizer rhetoric voice in the head. And I stopped doing it after the 10 days. And I remember walking in Battery Park away from my job, like to the subway, and being like, whoa, I can't feel myself breathing like I could yesterday. Like, there was this very visceral sense of, wait a second, this feels different than I did these past couple days, but I didn't even realize that it was working until I stepped away from it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that really hooked me. And I was like, all right, give me the take 30 or whatever the next thing is. And I kept going on that. And then I would share, I had a very transactional relationship with meditation for years after that, where it was just like, cool, here's this like stress reduction thing, like brushing my teeth I have to do to avoid being a huge asshole and being miserable, and that practice finally stuck from a flirtatious, do it for a couple months, stop doing it, do it for a couple months, stop doing it. When I had a panic attack in the early days of starting Troops, where I was alone in our office. My co-founder was on vacation. We were not making any money. And I was like, just by myself with my thoughts. And my heart just started racing and racing and racing and racing. And before I know it, I was like, oh my God, like I can't breathe. And I had to go outside, and I like laid on a balcony on like a 40th floor building in the middle of Midtown. Whoa. And just had to breathe for an hour. And I was like, okay, I can't not meditate anymore. and so that really hooked me. And since then, that was 2015. There's probably been no more than 2 or 3 days stretches that I haven't not done it. It's like, it pretty much has been an everyday thing. And, I'm avoiding, I don't want to ramble too much here, but the spiritual teacher thing was another, like, I would say that's when my path got really serious. When I found my teacher, which again came on the heels of an intense health crisis where my body was shaking 10 to 15 times a day uncontrollably, for months and even years after a psychedelic experience. I was in a conversation with my teacher, and I immediately felt my entire system relax in her presence. And there was something distinctly different about being in her presence. And I could tell that she had acquired something that I couldn't even put a name to, that I had not, and that I was interested in. And, simultaneously, she was sitting there completely joyous, peaceful, like kind of like incredibly playful. Like, here I was thinking I had the whole world figured out, being a startup founder, living in New York, doing all the right things. And she was like a 70-year-old woman with pink hair laughing at me. And I was just like, holy shit. Like, maybe I don't have this figured out. And this woman does have something that is eluding me. And it was really a sense of joy and ease. And that pulled me in. And started to make me question whether this external orientation path towards happiness was actually working. And it definitely wasn't.
Yeah. So powerful. I love that you hit on, two main doorways. The second that you just talked about was the doorway of joy, curiosity, love, interest. You meet a teacher, you're in their presence. Holy shit, I've got to get me some of that, whatever that is.
Yep.
I had a very similar experience on my meditative journey with Joseph Goldstein, the teacher I mentioned earlier. Just his presence. So this is clearly something that this person has worked on, cultivated, and I want some of it, whatever that is. So the interest path. And then you talked about the suffering path too. Man, panic attacks, shaking. It sounds like some things like shaking your foundations, like Scott, pay attention here.
Dude, yeah.
Until you did. So yeah, both of those things work. And you having tried a whole bunch of different things to either soothe the pain or out of the curiosity of what's going on with this teacher, this is how we find our way through. So thanks for sharing the story. Perfect.
Thank you, man. Yeah, it was fun to share those things as someone who's usually the one that's only asking the questions. To build on this, like, I think it would be helpful for people that are earlier on the journey. You mentioned like now these things are essentially blended. You don't even really know the difference. What does your practice look like now? Like, where can this lead to?
Yeah, I want to be careful not to offer up a picture of what it needs to look like for other people, but I'll share just in the interest of like how things, the shape they currently take for me. Um, there's two core pieces. The first is I continue to be on the waking up path, the meditative path. I work with a teacher still, and the way that I describe my meditation practice is catch as catch can. So we have three kids from 10 years old down to 1 year old. And our life is busy between work and home, and we homeschool. And so instead of a dedicated carve out of I wake up at 5 a.m. every day and I do the thing, I just meditate when I'm able to. Sometimes that's putting the kids down to bed. Sometimes I do wake up at 4 a.m., not on purpose, just like I'm awake. So I sit and meditate. And the practice has taken on a really delicious vibe for me. It's not something I do because I have to do, I have to check a box or I have to keep certain things away. It's just always available. And I'm sitting at a bus station or in a train station or waiting for a plane. And that's just my default go-to now because there's so much curiosity and interest that's online in that path for me. So that is a really core thread on the waking up side of things. And then interestingly, on the healing or integration side of things, I've found my way towards a school of healing work, integration work that you and I are both familiar with called Aletheia. Aletheia, I'm happy to answer more questions about Aletheia, but I'll just quickly say that Aletheia is a very particular style of parts work and other work that connects the healing and integration to the waking up directly. Not like loosely, very directly, how there are paths or portals from our parts directly into presence and cultivating awareness as well. And so in addition to practicing that in community, I also work with a coach on that side of things too. I feel very lucky and fortunate and supported in the work. I think you do this stuff long enough, you start meeting people and developing your own intuitions, and that's something that's been the case for me. So this mix, it's still a mix. And they still go through seasons. Sometimes there is more healing integration work that's feeling called for. Sometimes there's just the waking up work that, keep on doing that. And what's different now than was the case 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, is the striving energy has largely left the building. This isn't I got to do this or I got to do this in order to fix the ways that I'm broken and heal myself. And now it's driven by this love, curiosity, interest in showing up as a better father, as a better parent, as a better business partner. It's it's the hooks are in, and now I'm just a snowball rolling downhill, and it doesn't feel effortful in doing this work.
That's beautiful, man. I definitely resonate with your experience of that transition from trying to get somewhere to just enjoying the process. And I would offer to the listeners, if they're interested in learning more about Alethea, there is a podcast that I've done with the founder, Steve March, they can check out to learn more. It is a fantastic program. I hope you're enjoying this conversation so far. If you like what you hear, let me know by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and responding with a comment around something that you found interesting in the conversation so far. In addition to these videos, I do a lot of writing on the exploration of consciousness and my own personal revelations in my newsletter called Consciousness, the Doorway to Human Evolution. To receive these updates and more, all you need to do is simply head to the link in the description below and you'll be added to the community of 20,000 plus consciousness explorers receiving weekly ideas and inspiration in their inbox. I look forward to hearing from you there. Now let's get back to the show. And I think, a key inflection point on that journey for me of striving with this spiritual stuff, like in a rush to quote unquote get enlightened, there's a recognition that like the next lesson, the next part of healing, like whatever it is just going to show up on your doorstep. Like you don't need to seek it out. Life is going to give you that opportunity. And there's a real place of rest with that.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, there's a place of rest with it. And one really big foundational shift that came on the back of a dark night experience that I had, months of anxiety and depression, was that, the way that the suffering shows up, the challenges show up. The phrase from my therapist at the time was, "These are love at the door." When he said that, it totally broke me in the best of ways, where it wasn't like these are afflictions that I needed to overcome. It became, this is literally another way that love is showing up in my life. It's showing up in the way that I'm attached to bedtime routine being short because I'm tired and whatever. And like, this is showing me that there's a different way to be. Or sometimes it's just showing me that I'm tired. It's going to have some compassion for myself in that. But that frame shift for me, in addition to just relaxing into like life will show us where there is work that needs to be done between our own curiosity and the way things show up, but also that when the challenging stuff shows up, it's love too. Very powerful.
It is a super powerful idea. And I think it's something that people might have a difficult time grasping, right? It's like, how is months of anxiety love? I think that if you've been on the path for a while, you might have more formulated ideas on this, but I would be curious how you would look at that, or how you would advise someone to consider that, because it is pretty uncommon relative to our cultural narrative.
Yeah. Again, I'll issue the caveat here that I don't want to be shitting rainbows and trying to twist every form of suffering into some good thing for us in what we need to do or learn. Sometimes things suck and they just suck. And it's okay to be with the suck of it without having it to be different or some lesson that's waiting to teach you. For me, to answer the question you asked more directly, the months of anxiety and depression was a dying. It was a dying of an old way of being. For me specifically, it was caused by seeing the way unworthiness was driving me. This need to be something special or someone special. And, I carried this image, and it was on a retreat in particular when that image shattered. And my system just went into a spiral because I saw so clearly how the unworthiness was driving me and how that wasn't aligned with who I wanted to be or where I was moving. But I didn't have a new way of being online yet. I had no sense of where that was. So my system just went into a spiral. And the anxiety and the depression in some ways was asking me to slow down, pay attention. This is the most important work for you to do. It was be with the dying was ultimately what that particular season of life was. And in my case, being with the dying meant oh, like this anxiety and depression is calling me towards a new way of being. It's me mourning the death of this unworthiness that was fueling me and stepping into unknown and being okay stepping into the unknown. And it wasn't until I could see it that way through that narrative that that dark night shifted into a path of, a beautiful learning and growth that opened up. So do I wish that 4 months of anxiety and depression on anyone? No, that sucked. And it was profoundly useful for me at that moment in that season in this particular path.
Thank you for sharing that, man. I definitely relate those transformational conflicts when the old has to basically die so something new can be rebuilt can be some of the most challenging experiences. But I would offer for those listening, in hindsight, time and time again, there is this understanding that eventually comes where you understand the purpose of that, and you're actually can be grateful for it. And it doesn't feel, like you said, it would be nice if it didn't have to happen, but I really, really am appreciative that it did, because I know moving forward, I am completely different and I will never go back to something that wasn't even good, but I couldn't even see it wasn't good.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Spot on.
Thanks, man. One thing I do want to give a little bit of a demo on what this all can look like.
Amazing.
With what you described, but I would, before we go there, you did say the word intuition, and it's something I'm deeply passionate about. And I know that in your own life, that inner guidance has become something that's quite formative in how you move through the world. How did that come online for you? And what is that relationship like today?
Yeah, thanks. Love this question. The easiest shorthand way that I can describe it is in doing our parts work. So parts work is where we'll do a demo of it shortly, but it's where we're descending into thinking about ourselves as a multiplicity of parts instead of thinking about ourselves as single solitary people. And there are ways we can have conversations with these different parts of us, the parts of me that want to be worthy, the part of me that really wants to get things done, the part of me that feels frustrated, the part of me that feels anxious. And as we start to see ourselves as a collection of these parts, something starts to emerge very clearly, which is this notion of self or awareness, or this goes by many names in many different traditions, but is this quality of presence that we all have inside of ourselves that can relate to all of the different constellations of parts that we have. And for me, that as that self came into more contrast with my parts, I would start leading my life more from that quote unquote self, or from awareness, from presence. And again, it just was happening. It wasn't like I was striving to. There was some quality of, as I did this work, more presence would come online in different situations, in moments of conflict when it previously wouldn't, in moments of delight and joy when I could soak something up more. And so it was through the parts work interface is where this contrast started to develop. And since then, what I've noticed for myself and for clients is we can consult this quality of presence, ourselves, our highest self is another way to say it, in an ongoing way. And when we sit and are quiet, it's always accessible. Maybe not always. It's when we sit, a lot of times it can become accessible. And so for me, I've found myself tuning into that quality of presence, to that higher self, as I'm moving through the day or as I'm sitting. Hey, I'm noticing this particular conflict with me and my wife, or this is going on for my kids, or this business thing is happening. And the parts work interface is just a very powerful way to be able to do that. Where literally in my mind, I'm asking questions and receiving responses from this quality of presence that's kicking around in my system. How does that track for you, Scott?
Exactly the same. I mean, I had a very similar experience where it was through healing work that I started to experience emergent information that had a different texture from the thoughts or the parts or patterns, whatever you want to call it. And I was instructed by my teacher to um, begin to expand the ways that I interfaced with that they call it the true self in my tradition. And so it's like, yeah, you can ask the true self to replace this pattern. You can also ask it whether you should go on a date with this person. You can also ask it what you should do today. For me, it was just a process of progressively bold experimentation that started to really create a sense of trust in that, and started to really help me see that, like, I could rely on that for more than just healing work. I could use that to help me navigate reality. And it just continues to go deeper.
That's my experience too. It keeps on going deeper. And there are very few things that give me more joy and delight than encountering that in clients that I work with in a coaching context. I had this happen just last week. A founder that I was working with who saw so clearly how their life was being directed by their parts. And for them, it was parts that were achieved, very smart, very like powerful parts in their system. And they all of a sudden just saw this quality of presence that was available inside of this client's system as well. And their first reaction was, no, 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 like we're driving here. You can't do that. So it was interesting to see some internal backlash, but super powerful moment of just clear seeing, oh, this is possible. And this is my second or third session with this particular client. This isn't like, years down the path. This kind of insight, access to one's intuition can happen pretty early on with the right support and guidance.
That's amazing. I love that. And I'm so grateful that you shared that, because I think it could be easy to assume that this requires a decade of work. And maybe it does, right? But that just isn't a hard and fast rule, and points to the benefit and adventure of experimenting with these things.
Yeah, that's right. It's an adventure. It's as we get continue on these paths, we see how much play there is. What is this experience that's happening? What is reality? How much of this is happening in the mind? What is the mind? There's so many fascinating questions that you enter into the terrain of like, don't know. I don't know. I'm not fully sure. And what a delightful thing that can be true. And we can be having this experience or these conversations. There are whole worlds available to us in this material form existence, ways that we can look at it that completely change how we operate in the world. So there's just this real like deliciousness, enjoyment that opens up that is fun to explore together on a podcast.
Absolutely, man. I've tried a lot of shit and I don't find anything more fun than this. exploring this terrain. It's, I know you've used the upward spiral metaphor in our conversations. It's on your website. For me, that is such a powerful metaphor, and it's a symbol used throughout history to describe evolution. And yeah, it's just the more that you go up and the more you see clearly, it's like the more play there is, the more experiments there is, the more like, whoa, cool, I can do this. Like it's just really fun.
It is. Oh, there's so much to say about that. And I know you explore this with other people on your podcast, but the ways that we look at the world shape our reality hugely, hugely. And the deeper we go into this stuff, the more we see that at very subtle and refined levels. There's so much that's possible in our lived experience. So as not to make this all just theory, Scott, I appreciate you mentioning, would you be open to doing a little demo where,
yeah,
what we do in the demo work is we don't carry an agenda. It's not about getting to a particular thing or seeing things in a certain way, but we can hold the space in a way where we can see what emerges in the context of the conversation that we just had. Something like that sound like fun to you?
Let's do it.
Cool.
Let's do it live.
Do it live. And the thing for the that we'll debrief on afterwards is we're going to start with a more parts oriented frame. So this is more solidly on the healing and integration work side of the X and Y axis that I was describing earlier. And if it's possible, we'll I'd love to just share or point out places where that work can act as a direct portal into presence awareness oriented work. And you have a solid practice to build on, but that's the light intention that we'll hold in this space if you're game for it.
Sounds perfect. Let's
Cool.
do it.
So my sense is that you have a lot of presence already online, but I'd love for you just to settle in for a second into your body, into your experience. And I'm wondering if we could find a presence anchor, Scott, something in your experience that tells you that you're here in this conversation or in that seat with me.
Yeah, there's a warm, gooey feeling in the center of my chest.
Oh, nice. Warm, gooey in the center of your chest. Is it moving? Is it shifting? What's the gooiness like?
I'd say it's radiating.
Mm.
And it kind of has this like, I'm thinking of like a gusher, like that candy you had as a kid, where you like bite into it and it like squirts out. And it's just that like, that initial like sweet shock. It kind of just feels like that.
Wow.
It's really pretty sweet.
Warm, gooey, radiating gusher. That's just chilling in your chest right now.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So we can touch back into that presence anchor throughout our session, just as a way to ground. And I wonder, Scott, if there is something that you'd feel comfortable sharing with your audience in your life right now that feels alive for you.
Yeah, I had something come up last night where I found myself talking about someone in my family in a very non-open way. Like I was kind of like, they have issues and we should seriously get them help. And I could just tell my heart was closed, and it was the discussion was emanating not actually from a genuine desire to help, but from something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
nice.
it's been on my little note that I keep of like we should see what that's all about on my phone. So this is a perfect opportunity to see what that's all about.
Amazing. Here it is. So, if I'm hearing you right, there's this closed hearted, slightly judgmental tone that you noticed in regard to this family member. Is that right?
That's right.
And not everyone has access to this, but I'm curious if that shows up anywhere in your felt experience in or around your body. Is there any constriction or tightness or something else that shows up when you bring this up and go looking for it?
Yeah, I notice a contraction in the kind of upper chest neck area. Like as soon as I brought that experience into my awareness, I just noticed things just started to close.
Mm-hmm. And is that in the front or the back of your upper chest in there?
It feels in the middle,
Uh,
actually.
okay. So right in the middle of your upper chest and your neck, there's the sense of constriction that comes up right away.
Yes.
And how do you feel towards that sense of constriction, closed heartedness that's here?
As I make contact with it, I feel a sense of sadness.
Yeah. So as you make contact with this, there might be a part of you that feels sad. that you're judging or closed-hearted in these ways. How does that sound?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I just feel the sadness. I feel it.
And how do you notice the sadness?
It's like a quivering, a little bit of a welling pressure in my around my eyes and nose.
Yeah, and is it okay to be with this sadness, this quivering and drowsiness?
Yeah, it is.
It's, so there's this constriction in your upper chest and neck, and there's this sadness in your eyes and nose. Is that right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if one of those two parts of you would like to go first in terms of being seen
I
and
think
cared
the
for.
sadness.
Okay. So I wonder if you can just direct this inward towards the constriction. It's like, thank you for showing up. We'd love to talk more later. And would you be willing to soften back while we get to know the sadness a little bit better?
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Cool. And one of the aspects of this work is it's very respectful. So if that comes back online or if other feelings emerge as we're exploring the sadness, let me know. Let us know. And we will be very respectful of what comes up. Your system
Sounds
is in
great.
charge. So as you settle in, Scott, with the sadness, it's welling in your eyes and nose. Curious if there's anything else that you notice about this feeling, sadness.
It's just it feels like it's been there for a long time. Um
Yes, there's a sense that it's
and
been there for a long time.
and I do get a little bit of a visual of myself as a little boy.
Yeah. Yeah. How far away is the visual of the little boy? How close are you?
Uh, it's pretty right there.
Yeah, he's right here.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's a way for you to say hello without scaring him off, or I don't know if that's kneeling or moving closer to him in your mind's some way to just say hello.
Yeah. Yeah, I just said hi and got an acknowledgement.
Yeah. And is there any way for you to move closer without intimidating or scaring this little boy?
Yeah.
Nice. How does it feel right now to be with this little boy without needing him to be different in any way?
I feel a lot of compassion.
Yeah.
Like I just feel like it's okay. Like I don't know, like I got you.
How does that land for him when he hears the compassion and the care from you?
Just wants to give me a hug.
Yeah, is it okay to give him a hug?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and do that.
Hmm. Yeah, I just feel like my true self is really coming in and just saying I love you and it's okay. And it's kind of just showering with comfort.
Mhm. Beautiful. I wonder if you could ask him if there's anything that he would like to share with you about what it's like for him.
I'm really afraid that no one will like me.
Hmm. Yeah, I wonder if you could mirror that back to him, just so he knows you heard him.
Yeah, so I understand that you're afraid that no one will like you, and I imagine that's pretty hard to feel that way.
How does that land for him?
Yeah, it's like no one understands how hard it is.
Sounds really hard for him.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. It's really hard that you feel like that. Yeah, now I'm just kind of crying.
Yeah, is it okay to be with him while he cries?
Yeah.
Just surround him with love.
Hey,
It's
he's
fine.
like, you like me even though I'm like this? And I'm like, yeah. Mm, mm.
Is that land fun?
Yeah, I'm just feeling this real unconditional love start to come in.
Is real unconditional love coming in? How's that showing up in your experience?
Um, I feel lots of bliss in my arms. Um, a lot of the tightness in my chest area has softened.
Yeah, so
And
without leaving, sorry, go ahead.
there's just a warmth as well.
Nice. So without leaving the boy, kind of keep him in the embrace of this quality. Let's attune a little bit more deeply to this sense of bliss and warmth that's suffusing your arms right now. What do you notice when you tune into that even more?
Uh, it amplifies.
What happens as it amplifies? Just more bliss, more warmth, or something else?
Um, yeah, there's just a sense of my field of vision is kind of white. Not like completely white, but it's definitely gotten a lot lighter. And I'm kind of just in this just like vastness of 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 it.
You're in the vastness of this light, this bliss. Is that right?
Yeah.
And if you take one more step, Scott, and you become the vastness of bliss and light, take on a first person, I am this bliss. What do you notice in your experience as you make that shift?
And there's just lots of
Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Yeah. Can you be with this lots of love?
I can, and it seems like that really cracked something open. Like I could sense the body just like wanting to kind of cry, but then also there was like these like cracks inside of it.
Oh.
Like something just like popped.
Oh. Whoa.
Yeah. Like it's like I don't know if I want to cry or laugh kind of
Whoa.
thing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So there's just like a crack or a pop. And what's happening now in your experience after the crack or the pop?
I'm just here.
Yeah.
Like there's no need to do anything. It's just like a deep, deep presence.
And from this place of deep, deep presence, I wonder if we can turn back, Scott, and behold the boy you were holding and the constriction attached to this sense of judgment all together. And I'm curious if there's anything that you notice about the scene now that feels new or different than it did 20 minutes ago.
It definitely all feels contained inside of this white everything. Like there's been a merging. And I actually can't find those other things.
Mm.
Like, kind of felt like it's all melted into one thing.
Yeah. That one thing being this vastness, this love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you were to ask yourself the question, this sense of presence, what is there to do in this particular situation? This family member, this sense of judgment, what feels alive and fresh right now about this?
Yeah. What I get is just love her exactly as she is.
Does that make sense when you hear that?
Yeah. And from this place, that feels very easy to do.
Yeah. What does it look like to love her exactly as she is?
I just have this picture of her. And I kind of just am viewing her as love itself. Like I kind of just would see her as love.
As we start to bring this session to a close, I'd love for you just to invite any sense of the parts that we met into the scene. You can almost put out a little call. Hey, constriction. Hey, little boy carrying sadness. If you're still here, appreciate you for being here and for showing me this, helping me see this realization.
Yeah, there's a gratitude for them.
And is there anything else that you want to express inward towards your system, or that your system, either these parts or some other aspect, wants to express to you?
Yeah, I mean, I just got, when I answered that question when I asked that question in my heart, the words that came through were, you are everything and everything is you.
That sounds powerful.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So take your time, Scott. If there's any other thanks, appreciations for that wisdom or anything else, then come back and meet with me and we'll do a debrief on the other side. You can shake it out if you need to. This is work. Very powerful stuff that's happening. Welcome back.
Doesn't feel like work. I mean, it feels pretty damn good is what it feels like. Thank you for that, brother. That was really, really special.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just for the listeners, can we just do 2 minutes of debrief of what we just saw there?
I would love if you could lay that out for them and frankly for me.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, what we just did, and I'm going to continue to reference the sense of healing work and awakening work, is we started with Scott and something that's really alive for him, and that brought up these feelings, this feeling of constriction, which is in parts work parlance, that's the part of him that feels constricted. And that was attached to this feeling of sadness as well. And by just kind of respectfully settling in to those parts and seeing what's alive for them, what their experience was like, what then opened up was a quality of loving presence in Scott's system, which happened relatively quickly compared to other folks that I work with, just because Scott has done so much work cultivating that higher self, the true self, and so we move directly from working and having a conversation with these parts directly into a quality of presence that is more connected to this sense of you are everything and everything is you, which in my map, that's a more vertical turn. And then when you behold the scene, this integration work from that vista of presence, different things emerge than if you're caught enmeshed in the challenges that are existing with the parts themselves. And so one of the things that I love about this flavor of work, mixing both the healing work and the waking up work together, is it's almost like some problems get sidestepped, not in a spiritual bypassing kind of way, but in a, well, there's a whole new perspective that's available here. This person who I was struggling with is actually love herself. And I'll just finish with a question, Scott, of kind of on a practical level. Somebody watching that might be like, well, that was nice. He just like, she's loved, but nothing's going to change in his life or her life. I'm curious if there's anything at that practical level, like what do you do differently coming out of a session like that or a conversation?
Well, here's the funny thing with this type of work and why I'm obsessed with it is that the shift actually tends to happen automatically. And what I mean by that is that I will just notice that, the next time I'm in that situation, the way that I react automatically is likely to be different. Now, a lot of these parts and patterns are stronger than others and they might take some more work, and that's not always the case. But as like a just general trend, like that is how I experience the benefit of this is that like you
Yes.
just perceive it differently. Like your automatic response is different. And so, I don't anticipate, frankly, me doing any like mental prep of like, okay, she's love, like, maybe I'll have a quick flash of this experience, but my optimistic hope is that the next time I am in that experience, it will just be easier to view her with an open heart.
Yeah. And what's so fascinating too is this stuff is contagious. So not only is that just happening automatically for you, but imagine what the experience is going to be like for her between a Scott who's feeling some constriction and a Scott who's just open-hearted, loving. So it's a powerful thing that starts to affect more than just you as well. So I share your enthusiasm for this work.
100%, man. And that's like the coolest thing. I just had Gay and Katie Hendricks on the podcast. They wrote Conscious Loving. They're like prolific writers, but a big thing that they talk about is taking 100% responsibility in your relationships. And, as you do that, the craziest thing happens is that you do the healing or you do the inner work, and then the people around you tend to shift without you even doing anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it is really amazing. And you can kind of connect the dots when you get into the awakening stuff where you're like, wait a second. Yeah, well, I could see how that actually makes sense, because if we are all one thing, then as my inner world shifts, the outer world should shift, because they are in the very least connected, if not the same. Um,
Amazing.
and it's just the coolest shit ever.
It's incredible. Yeah, and you brought it full circle. If there's something that I'd love for people to take away from this conversation is that the meditative waking up work is different than the healing or the integration work, but also those things collapse. You can do work in ways where you're working both sides of things. This is all one thing. We are just one person moving through the world. So powerful stuff, Scott. Thanks for being willing to
Beautiful,
demo.
absolutely, man. I'm so happy we got to do this because I know a lot of people will listen to a theoretical conversation and be like, well, what the hell does that actually look like? And I think, you did a pretty masterful job of demonstrating a potentiality of what that could look like. And so, um, thank you so much, my friend. You are a true master with this stuff and also such an amazing student. I love listening to you talk about it. And I want to just give you the opportunity to share, like, if people want to learn more about you, your work, anything that's like lighting you up right now, I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to do that.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, no, for me, a lot of my work happens in two places. One is as a coach. I work with individual founders. So if that fits someone in this audience, and whether you want to work with me or there's a lot of folks that I know, my website is DerekHaswell.com. You can go check it out, drop me a line. Happy to have a conversation and point you in good directions. And then the meditation app that I had started some 10 years ago now was formerly 10% Happier. Now is called just Happier, a simpler orientation towards the world. And so you can find that on the App Store anywhere. And the last place is on Twitter. I'm on Twitter/X as Dr. Haswell. R is a middle initial, so not a doctor. Don't play one on TV. But I like to sometimes share some of the insights that are happening from my coaching sessions or as I'm moving through the world there too. So those are the places you can find me.
Amazing, man. Well, thank you very much. We'll link all those out for everybody so they're easy to find. And so much love for you, dude. So grateful that we got a chance to do this. And I'm just excited to just continue on this journey
The
with
feeling is
you.
mutual, Scott. Appreciate the work you're putting out in the world with this and other pods too. So excited for you.